This is a training program of PAL Network for support of the Roma entrepreneurship. Lesson 2: Types of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. In this lesson, in the first part, we're going to continue to specify some of the main aspects of entrepreneurship. In the second part, we're going to describe the first steps to start a business. And finally, in the last part, we're going to discuss the socioeconomic aspects of entrepreneurship. The term entrepreneurship first appeared around the 1700s, but as we have seen in Lesson 1, there has been many contributions to the concept. The simplest thing that could be said is that entrepreneurship means making one's own business. However, through the classical theories about entrepreneurship, as we have seen, some argues that entrepreneurship is the entrepreneur's willingness to venture into a risk-taking adventure because he discovers some probability of profits. Others emphasize the role of the entrepreneur as the creator of some innovation he is trying to sell on the market. Some others point out that the entrepreneur is creating a new product or process or service that did not exist until that time and meets a human need. Peter Drucker developed his idea arguing that the entrepreneur is someone who is looking for change, reacting and responding to it, and seeing it as an opportunity. A good example of this development of communication is from typewriters to personal computers and from there to the internet. In the previous lesson, we saw some of the main soft and hard skills that are important for entrepreneurs. Here, we have some common characteristics of entrepreneurs. Creativity is the spark that drives someone into developing new products, services, or methods of entrepreneurship. It is the spring from improvement, innovation, and it involves constant education, searching, thinking out of the established, thinking out of the box. Targeting dedication is the motivation of the businessman to work hard, even 12 hours a day and more, even 7 days a week, at least in the beginning, until the whole effort takes off. Resolution is the strong desire to succeed. It is what makes the entrepreneur insist again and again after difficulties, adversities, and tribulations. It is she who pushes him to make the 10th phone call after 9 that had been fruitless. Flexibility is the ability to respond quickly to market needs, the ability to dominate your dream but always keep in mind the reality of the market. There is a story in the United States about a businessman who started a very nice store selling French street sweets. However, his clients asked him muffins as well. The entrepreneur preferred to modify a little his dream, and he began to make and sell muffins rather than risk losing his clients. Leadership, on the other hand, is what helps you to set the rules and set goals. It is the ability to monitor whether the rules are being met and the goals are achieved. Passion is what makes the entrepreneur there and keeps him alert. It is what makes him persuade others to believe in his vision. It cannot be substituted for planning, but keeps him focused and motivates him to guide others to inspire on their plan. Self-confidence. Reduce uncertainty and level of risk, and increase the chances of success of the business or business idea. It can still be based on previous experience. Confidence allows the businessman to hear criticism without hesitating or frightening. Smart is an American word that describes common sense combined with knowledge or experience from a similar business or effort. The first gives the entrepreneur good instinct, the second the experience. All in all, entrepreneurs have at varying degrees similar characteristics, but what if one is missing one or more? Many things are learned. But for some people, the entrepreneurs may need to hire someone who has them. The most important strategy is to know its strong points and build on them. Entrepreneurship as an activity can be classified in 4 categories. A. Entrepreneurship and combination of factors of production. The entrepreneur is the one who will find and coordinate workers with the different skills and competences and the different processes within the enterprise. They will ensure proper and adequate flow of information and the knowledge needed to complete each activity and get the best decisions at all times. Thus, The entrepreneur activity should be exercised by people who have sufficient information about the market and decision-making skills, leadership skills among workers, and the skills to coordinate various factors of production. B. Entrepreneurship and innovation. According to Joseph Schumpeter's famous words, the entrepreneur is a creative destruction force, in the sense that each innovation degrades, fades, and eventually destroys any business or industry that cannot or does not want to adopt, putting in place the most updated and innovative ones. Business innovation means exploring and exploiting new opportunities to meet human desires and needs. C. Entrepreneurships and risk-taking management. According to several economists, the essence of entrepreneurship is to take risk from the uncertainty of economic life. The entrepreneur is willing to take similar risks and of course is looking for ways to limit them in the course of his business. D. Entrepreneurship and exploitation of opportunities. In today's complicated and complex society and economies, there is almost always incomplete information. The entrepreneur then pays off in an attempt to see every opportunity of profit presented in the market. The process of capitalizing on opportunities also benefits the whole of society, as they will be able to enjoy more, cheaper, better, or different products which in other cases might not even know they exist. There are two main types of entrepreneurship. Pure entrepreneurship is said to be the only entrepreneur who brings together all the roles and functions of the business. He is also a financier, employee, owner, and manager of the business, without using any particular fixed capital or equipment. In our age of large scales and specialization, pure entrepreneurship is not the most common case. On the other hand, means entrepreneurship is when there are more inputs other than the entrepreneur's personal work. For example, capital, labor, machines, and raw material. It is distinguished in two categories: entrepreneurship of workers, who is labor intensity, when the main volume and functions inflows is labor, either of the entrepreneurs or employees employed in the enterprise. The other one is entrepreneurship of capital, when the entrepreneurs contribute only the funds of the enterprise, which in turn mainly use machinery and fixed assets for its production. Being an entrepreneur is of course an attractive career prospect. Many take this decision from various motives, from their need to be independent, the desire to help, and the desire to gain social status. However, the prospective entrepreneur must have clear answers to the following questions. Does he really want to be responsible for a business? Which product or service will be the basis of the business? What will be its market, and where will the business be established? How to ensure the funds needed for the start? Will the company's dynamic be sufficient to ensure a good salary for employees and a remarkable profit for the entrepreneurs over time? Will he or she be employed full or part-time in the business? Does the candidate want to start on his own or with partners? Other options among which the prospective entrepreneur must decide are the following. Will they set up a new brand or will they buy an existing one? Will they continue to operate an already existing? Will it join a franchise network? The answers to all of the above questions are not unambiguous. Experience teaches that there is no right or wrong. Responses depend on the judgment of the entrepreneur, who owes, before taking their decisions, to gather as much information and advice as possible. The preparatory work consists of good market research, development of the product or service that will come out on the market, preparation of a good business plan showing how much capital is needed, and the appropriate arrangements and agreements to form this capital. A very important initial decision is whether you start alone or with partners. In order to respond to this, a number of factors have to be taken into account. For example, the specific skills and competences of each and the type of business envisaged. Surveys and studies in the United States have shown that about half of new businesses are founded by groups of at least 2 people. Sometimes they meet just to set up the business. Most of them, however, are familiar and they know each other very well. without being rare that the founders are spouses in life. Starting with a team could have many advantages. For example, team members will share decision making, a day-to-day management, and provide moral support to each other. Affinity within the group can also trigger creativity. Many benefits can come from combining and pooling financial resources and skills, and generally speaking, strong teams have more chances of success. Of course, groups have drawbacks. For example, team members will share the ownership of the business and the decision making. These two aspects can cause problems, especially when a team member has poor judgment or work habits. There are quarrels and conflicts in many groups. They may concern management plans, business processes, or future goals. However, generally speaking, the advantage of the team outweighs the potential risk. There are many ways to find ideas: to read enough, to talk to people, and to try to answer questions such as what limitations exist to existing products or service, what would you like, which does not exist. Are there other uses for new technology? Are there new ways to use or sell existing products or services? What changes are taking place in society? Are there population growth whose needs are not met? Are people perception changing? For example, snacks gave ground to develop a huge industry and trade in the file in the Western world. In this sense, business ideas are generally divided into four categories: an existing good or service in an existing market. It is in general the most difficult case, and even for startups, as it means that in a competitive market you will win the customers, something that can be done with tempting offers, great advertising, etc., but the entry cost will be rather inaccessible for a new business. A new product or service for a new market. It is the higher risk option for a new company, as both the product and the market are new and unknown. More research and more detailed planning is required. However, if it is successful, such a strategy is promising for a new business and the one that usually keeps the most profit. A new product or service for an existing market can be understood as an existing but improved or differentiated product or service. Small businesses, for example, engage in the production of original greeting cards using more inspired humor or more creative graphics than the large companies in the industry, who are selling pre-printed greeting cards. An existing product or service in a new market. This might be another country, another region, or a new hole in the existing market. For example, businesses selling home or office products online are targeting new markets, people who don't have the time or willingness to go to the shops. The later two categories have limited risk, but a careful market research and product design can limit them. They also offer opportunities for startups to develop effective strategies, innovation, diversification, and market specialization. In most of the countries, the prospective entrepreneur must choose a type of company for his business. Generally speaking, the type of companies are three: the individual business, the partnership with other entrepreneurs, and the company. Each type has its advantage and disadvantage. Legislation and regulation vary from country to country and even locally. Sole proprietorship. Here, the entrepreneur is the sole owner of the business, and he or she is solely responsible for its debt and legal obligations. The vast majority of business around the world are individual business because it is the simpler, easier, and less costly form of business. However, the entrepreneur has unlimited liability for all the debts and obligations of the business, so if anything goes wrong, they can endanger all their assets, business, and even personal property. Partnership of individuals. Companies are set up by two or more entrepreneurs who share the company's capital and other assets, liabilities, and profits. Their biggest advantage is the sharing of responsibility and obligations. The biggest disadvantage of companies of this type is the possible disagreement in the course of their operation, which depends in turn on how well and how long the partners have known each other. However, a founding venture set up by an experienced lawyer can greatly help in the smooth running of the business. Society anonymity. They are recommended in cases where the prospective entrepreneur is planning a large-scale business. As a legal entity separated from the capital, the limited liability company may sue, acquire, or sell assets and lend money. The capital of public limited companies is divided into shares that one, few, or many people can hold. Ownership is based on the percentage of shares held by each. Shareholders are not responsible for the debts of the company unless they have been personally guaranteed. The shareholder's liability is limited to the capital contributed. Anonymous companies can attract more investments, raise funds, buy selling shares, and survive more easily than a property change. They provide greater protection against partner responsibilities than other corporate firms. The horizon of their development is unlimited. However, more complex and more costly how to set up these type of companies, and they are subjected to more regulations. The business plan must necessarily be organized before taking binding decisions to start the business. It describes the company's vision, strategy, and objectives, and it indicates the size of the required funding, the own funds that the entrepreneur will contribute, and the possible external investments or borrowing. Its existence is important because it facilitates financiers and investors to appreciate the quality and scale of the venture and improves the administrative capacity of the business leaders. A good business plan changes with the business, so it needs to be updated while necessary. The basic elements of a typical business plan includes the title page, the table of contents, executive summary, company description, product service, market and competition, marketing and selling strategies, operating plan, management organization, financing, supporting documents, and other types of documents. Also, before starting the business, the prospective entrepreneur must prepare a current realistic budget for both the actual amount needed to start and the amount needed to continue operating. The answer to the following questions are critical to the prospect of the project. Is there a detailed calculator of the funds needed to set up the business? How many funds can the entrepreneurs allocate for setting up the business? How many capitals will need to be borrowed and how to cover interest and capital installments? What working capital will be needed to meet the needs of the first year? And what targets for sales, gross profits, operating costs, and operating profits are set for the first year? Is there a possibility of subsidizing the enterprise from a state or other entities? Is there a possibility of co-opting with someone who will put capital or something else? Has a chapter been calculated to deal with some unforeseen situations at least in the first 2 years of the corporation? Has it determined what elements of the business, work, energy, raw materials, etc., will absorb most of the cost? Has the amount of product or service that the business has to sell been calculated in order not to suffer damage? What should be the amount of product or service that the business has to sell to be sustainable and profitable? With the business plan in hand, the entrepreneur is targeted at potential financiers, families, friends, investors, and banks. This is the last part of the presentation, which is going to talk about the social sector of the economy, the social enterprises. The high unemployment rate of the 1980s and the welfare restraint in the 1990s shaped the file in which the social economy was built with mainly collaborative workers' associations designed to fill the state's inability to provide social goods and help to integrate social vulnerable groups into the labor market. It is developed to meet those needs of society for which the private sector is not available because of the lack of high profit, and the state sector cannot contribute due to the absence of financial instruments. The file of social economy is first and foremost bound between state policy and private investment for economic activity. Focus should be on issues such as financing opportunities in the sector, good examples from abroad, and the newly adopted law on the social economy that has many points to be discussed. The main objectives of this institution framework are the disseminate examples of the social economy in all possible sectors of the economy activity, create a favorable environment that supports and strengthens productive self-management projects so social needs can contribute to social progress and equitable economic development. Define and highlight collective and social benefits as components of the social and solidarity economy. And finally, effective development of consultation, participation, and co-decision with the social partners on issues that govern the political, legal, and administrative file. At this point, we will generally refer to the necessary steps in terms of the legal and regulatory requirements of the states in order to set up a business. The type, number, and scope of the requirements vary according to the type of business to be set up. First, you need to create a status, especially if it is a co-enterprise, the type of which varies considerably depending on the type of company. They also vary their publication obligations in various government departments and archives. 2. Registration in state tax registers. Since it is a corporate form, the company must make its own registration regardless of the previous registration of the partners in the registers as individuals. Third, registration in the relevant Social Security register. 4. Securing licenses for urban planning if anything is to be built or transform a pre-existing building. For installation if it is a special type of activity, for example, industrial, agro-livestock, etc. And for operation, for any type of activity which is going to be requiring a kind of license, for example, for industry, craft, healthcare stores, etc. And finally, the registration in the relevant chambers, associations as far as required. Thank you. See you in the next lesson. For more details, please read Learner Material Lesson 2 version in English.